So let's start then. So today I am going to talk about class in Python. So we'll discuss a bit about what is class and how it is helpful in programming language. But going forward, you will understand the importance of class, and everything we work or use with programming language is written within a class so that we can refer it at any given point in time, and then do programming in a much more effective way than calling some random things here and there, right? So it's about organizing the code, reducing the number of lines, or reducing the repetition. So think from that perspective, right? So how do you make sure that you can leverage something which is common across your application and use it again and again? And even you can share it outside of your application if it is too generic in nature. So let's understand the structure, the syntax, how we will write, and then we'll understand from that perspective. So let me go ahead and create a file that is 22 December 21.py. Okay. If I just go ahead and have this file. Now, what we have learned so far that we can create functions using definition, and we can call that function from within the same file, or if we create that function in a separate file, we can call it as a module. Import the file and then call the function from that file. Now, there is a better way of doing it. There is a better way of doing it in the function where you can actually wrap it around or put it inside a class, and then you can actually call the class or initialize the class with the value of the function. So that way you should be able to now communicate with the function from a real life perspective, right? And that's what we call it object oriented programming. So that's a beginning of understanding the concept of object oriented programming. So what it essentially says that you build an object. So when you say that you create string object, right? So you basically allocate a memory space by saying that I want to have a equal to hello. Okay, so there is a place in your computer memory which gets allocated, and that's what we call or understand as an object, right? And we play around to keep changing that value of the object. So now let's see how that definition of the class looks like. It is fairly simple. Python is all about doing things very simple, right? So you will find that defining a class is also fairly simple. So there is um, no rocket science behind defining a class. So if you have a class, right, and you just like wanted to let's say play around with a class, you can just say that, hey, I have a class, and you can give a name to a class. There is a convention, but you can give any name. So I can say my class. That's the name of the class. And I have to have something, let's say a equal to 100. If I have the value like a equal to 100 and my class ends here, so let me put a line just to indicate that class ends here. So that's all about class. It's fairly simple one. And let's say you want to call this value of a and use it um, in the in the in the application again and again. So instead of you declaring a again and again, you define. So maybe you put something like Independence Day of India, like 1947. So whenever you need that um, value of a, which is 1947, you call it again and again. How do you call a class? You say my class object. This is just a variable name, just like you define a equal to, and you say my class. Now this time you open and close a parenthesis. So that indicates that now you are initializing a class to this object. Now going forward, you can use this object to access any member of this class. So right now I have only one member, that is a variable called A. So if I have to print the value of A, what I can do, I can go ahead and use this object dot A, as simple as that. Okay. So you can now define an object. So you can have any name. It can be M class O. So you can actually do it like that. So my class object. So you can either have this kind of variable name, or you can have a detailed name of the variable so that you understand later point in time what this is all about. Now this is the class. Okay, that's fairly a simple class. What I can do now, I can say 22 December and run it. And you see in 1947 is printed. Okay, I can say current year, maybe in a variable, and that is 2021. If I have to print the other variable, what I can do, I can change the value of B, and this will basically change and execute and show both the values like 1947 and 2021. So I can access the value from within my class, and when I initialize the class, all the things are getting allocated in the memory. Now there is a bit about this class, right? So you can have variable as simple as that, or you can have, let's say, function within the class. So imagine that you have something like a addition function. Okay, this addition function basically takes, you can take two parameter x and y, and then you can define the value of the function which it need to return. So you can either print or return something. So let's say if I want to print, so simply print so that I don't have to print it again and again, is value of x plus y. So whatever the two value you pass, it will give me a result. So let me hide these two lines. And then let me try to call the addition method. Now, if I have to call the addition method, I'll say addition, you can say here, and then I pass 100, 200. And that will give me a print statement or print output as 300. So if you see here, the addition takes two positional argument, x and y. That's fine. Just a moment. So that's very interesting. Any guess what could be an error here? Any guess? No guess? Okay, so let me show you a little bit of thing here. Okay, so what this error said, you can see here in the error message. Do you hear me? Okay, yeah. So what essentially it said in the error message is that the addition takes two positional arguments, but three were given. Okay, so to make a function, okay, part of a class, you have to first, in the definition, you have to first provide a keyword as the first parameter called self. Okay, that's what you need to do. So if you do that, and then pass your remaining two parameters. You can use them later point in time, right? So you can say that self dot blah blah blah, and then say why this self is important, because you can set something from within the function. So what is the thing? Let's say I say result. So you define a variable called result equal to 0. So if you say this, instead of print x plus y, you say this, and then you come over here and say self dot result equal to x plus y. Now I don't have to print it here. You should not be printing anything here. What you can do, you can call this value, right? And this will that will change the variable value of the result. Now let me print it here first to show you what exactly the value looks like. So if I say MCO dot result. Now can you tell me what would be the output of this print statement here in the line number 11? Any guess what will be the print output of this? Any idea? Just guess. Nothing wrong in guessing. Sorry? No, it will be 0 because this result is this result, right? It is not yet changed because it is changing in the addition method or the function. Okay? So it will print 0. You can see that 0 is getting printed. But I'm calling the addition. There is no print, so nothing is happening. But if I print this statement again, this will print me or give me 300. So if I just run this, you'll see that first it was 0, the result was 0, and then I did the addition and result got changed and become 300. That is why when you use self, you can change any member variable of the class by adding self.result equal to whatever the result is. So for example, if you're doing addition, subtraction, deletion, multiplication, all you need to do is that you need to return some value, right? After doing the calculation. Instead of you printing it here, you should not be doing this kind of thing in the actual body of the function because you don't know what kind of application this function is calling. It may or may not be able to print. So if you are using Python like this, what I am doing, you can print it in the command line. But if you use Python in a different context, there may be then printing makes no sense. So print is only when you run Python in console kind of application. But let's say you are calling it from a website, so you print that, nothing will happen basically. So what you need, you basically need to have a third value in some variable, and then you can use it later point in time. Either you want to show it as a pop-up or a message or a text box, whatever way you want to show. So you basically get a third variable called result and put the value of the result over here by doing the calculation. So similarly, if you do subtraction, multiplication, you can change the value of the result, and you can just print the value of the result from the calling place. So that way a class becomes sort of like a library. So when you think from reusability perspective, you don't really try to tie it up with a specific type of application, right? Because today you can build an application for web, for desktop, for mobile, right? When you build something like that, you need to think about that. I don't know who the person who will use it. So let's build something generic in nature so that anybody can use it. So if I now give this class to anybody and ask them that there is an addition method, you can call by passing only two parameters. They will just call it like this. And you can actually use the result variable to get the output of the result. They can simply get the output of the result from here. So you can actually have a function defined like that. And that way, it will basically give you an ability to, to define any function as you wish, right? Make sense? Any question? Any doubt? I know sometimes it can be overwhelming, but if you have doubt, you can always ask question. Thank you. Okay, so if let's say I want to print all of them, instead of calling print again and again, I say I print the value of A. Now, yeah, I can either say A, and if I try to call this function, this will give me an error. First of all, it is giving already a notification saying that A is not defined. So it is unable to identify A from my definition, because every function you define within a class, the first parameter has to be self. If you say so, that means it is, as the name suggests, it's plain simple English. This is the class object. So if you have to get a member of that class object, you say self dot A. It will get you the value. So like that, if you print the value of B and if you print the value of result, you get all of them printed one by one. Now let's say I want to print them all. What I can do, I can call it from here. Now, when I call this print all, I don't have to pass any value. You can see that it is asking me not to pass anything. Self is something which I don't need to pass. Self is basically getting replaced by this. So when it internally, what happens, Python changes this function into something like this. So it will become like print all MCO. That's how the Python is kind of interchanging the placement. But I'm writing from my programming language perspective to call this function like this. So the self is nothing but the class from which I'm calling. So it basically will print. So now if I run this code, let's see what happens. You see that I'm getting 3 values printed. So it actually did the addition by passing 100 and 200 and then printing it. So I can even pass the value of A and B over here instead of hard coding. And I can say self, I can say MCO dot A, MCO dot B, and then I print them all in from here. So you can see now it is doing an addition between 1947 and 2021 and then getting me the output as 3968 from all from the function variables. Now imagine that I also want to have this value dynamically changed when I call a class. So when I build a class or build an object of the class, that point in time, I want to say that I want to tell what is the value of A and B. Okay. So in that case, what you can do, you can get rid of these two. Let's say, okay. And then I can define something like an init method. So init is a very special method and there is a name reserved for it. So you cannot have the same name for your own personal method like addition. So that's a method defined by me, right? So you cannot have that kind of definition for init. So init starts with this double underscore and you can see that init. So we call it as a kind of like a keyword based thing, right? So if I say so, I have none. So let me just not use this default whatever value is. And okay. Now in this init method, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass X and Y. When I pass X and Y with this init, I need to say self.a equal to X. So basically making sure that I'm defining a variable called A and B equals to y. So I'm setting those values. Now benefit is that I define a class with two variables and I can call an addition function without basically passing any two variable. Now this time inside the result, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say self dot a plus self dot b. Okay, only one time. I print all of them and I do that. Now, if you imagine that if you have another method called multiplication, so let me indent it properly. Okay, and then I say self dot a star self dot b, but maybe I want to say mult result. Okay, so the multiplication result is another variable called mult result. It's a add underscore result. So and then I print add underscore result. I say addition colon this. So but do a little bit of formatting, okay, so that you get to see what exactly it looks like. Now a comma b, let's pass a b. So I'm passing two values a and b in the same line so that I don't have to print many different lines. Result of addition, so I'll say result of addition, result of multiplication is mult result. Okay, so do you understand what I'm trying to do? Let me just pause for a while. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to define a class and then I'm just trying to get rid of all the member variable. The first method I have defined is a keyword reserve method called init, and I'm passing the self, which I need to pass always, but I'm also passing two parameters. So this time when I define a class, I need to pass two parameter values here. We will do it later. And then I'm actually having a method called mult, which will basically be doing multiplication between two numbers I passed, a and b, and then addition between two numbers. So in this multiplication and addition, it assumes that when the class is defined, it had two parameters or two values, and using them, they will give you the multiplication result and addition result. So I'm basically storing them in two different variables called mult result and add result. And by calling the print all, I'm printing all the values one by one. Okay, that's what I'm doing. So now what I'm going to do, let me clean this up. I am actually initializing this class and I'm calling the print all to just to print. But while I'm initializing, I can initialize 10 2. If I say so, then the class will have two variables, a equal to 10, b equal to 2. Now when I call this MCO dot addition, it will not expect me to pass any parameter. You can see that it's saying none because there is no parameter except self. And similarly, if I have multiplication, it will also not ask me to provide any value, but they will do the actual calculation. They will initialize these variable values and they will actually let print all the values. So let's see the output. So what do you think the output would look like? Any guess? And it will also print the value of A and B, that is whatever that value is, 10 and 2. That also will be printed by this line. Okay, so let's see. Now you can see that this is what's coming. So it is showing you the value of A is 10, value of B is 2, and the result of addition is 12, result of multiplication is 20. So you basically are now defining function, but because that function is within the class, so you can use the member variable of the class without passing the value of the function. Now, when I build something like a calculator and I say that I pass two values and you do all the mathematical calculation against this two value, like multiplication, addition, subtraction, division, and all four, right? So think about only four calculation we have, primary calculation. Then I don't have to pass the same value again and again in all the four methods or function. I can just set the value in the class and then call this again and again. So the beauty is that at any point in time I need to change the value, I change it in one place and it'll all be handled automatically. So you can see now A is 100, B is 2. So the addition becomes 102 and multiplication result becomes 200. Okay, so that's the benefit of having a member variable, and that's what you get when you use class. Okay, and it is all wrapped around within the class. The moment the class is vanished or you delete it, you delete this object um, declaration. So let's say I want just remove this, it'll simply not be accessible. So it is sort of like a box of chocolate. So when you carry the box, you carry all chocolates, but when you let's say finish the whole thing, the box is empty. So something like that. So you basically control the box and the content of the box is automatically kind of handled for you. Okay, that's what it is basically doing. So this is a bit about class, and what I have already in my Python for Kids page, which I'm gonna show you over here. Let me just get you a page open. Okay, so that's in, I think, under day 18. Okay, so all I did is that I covered most of it and I added some bit of it just to explain a bit more about the thing. And you can see that the class is fairly simple in terms of syntactical in nature, but if you do not practice, you will probably forget how to write class. And that is very important in programming language. You need to practice. You need to write it. It is like muscle memory, we call it. And that will help you not to think about the basic uh, concept or things like this how to write things and spend more time on thinking about what to write, right? And then focus mostly on the concept and the implementation rather than focusing more on the technical implementation side of it. And that is important that you spend a bit more time by defining these things, and you can actually um, create or be innovative about defining the class by yourself. So you can create, let's say, list of students with their all information like first name, last name, email address, class, section, roll number, and build a class with an object, right? And then you can initialize that class with all the object and print something like a level, level in the sense like, let's say what do you paste it on top of your notebook or the book, right? That kind of level you can print by providing that information. So you can say that I need to print 10 levels. So you just run it 10 times. It'll be printed with all nice formatting, using the string dot format. You can format the output and you can put the dashes and all these things and make it a nice looking level, and it can be printed. You can just print it and then paste it in there. So you can actually provide one information and get, let's say, 10 levels printed for you. And then you can do it within the class. So it's just an example. I just made it out right now. Thought about what could be the possible implementation which you can try out. So what is more important is that to try out something like this, right? So which means that you will be able to build a build a library which you can use it again and again. That's the concept. So let me show you something on the similar line. Okay. So let me quickly write something which makes more sense. So circle dot height. So if you, I know many of you are doing geometry, right? So if you know the radius of a circle, right, you can find the area of a circle. You can find, let's say, a circumference of the circle, right? Is it something you do in the geometry? I think. Say no if you don't do it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So we can define something like a library to do the calculation for a circle. So if I say class circle, if I just say so, and then you know that we use something like a pi to do this calculation, 2 pi r. That pi is having a longer value, but we'll only consider 3.14, let's say. Yeah, that also we can do. So we can take 22 by 7. Okay, so that will give me the pi value. And then I can define something like this. And inside that, I will say init. And what I'm going to do inside the init is that I'm going to set the radius of the circle. So I say that when I have this self and the radius, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define the default value of the radius. If I say 1, that means a radius is optional. So you can either pass a value of radius or not. So if you pass a value of the radius, it will be considered that value. Otherwise, it will be considered as 1. Okay. So that's what we call as default value. So you say radius. So sometimes this can be confusing. You can just pass radius val and it will be val. So that means whatever value you are passing through parameter is getting assigned to the member variable called radius. Okay, and radius will be defined. Okay, now you can go do a calculation of the circumference thing, right? Getting, how do you get the circumference? You say def get cir sorry circumference. Did I spell correct? F-E-R-E-N-C. Oh yeah. And then I say self, and then I just have something different this time. Return self dot radius. So what is the formula? Yes. So that is self dot pi into 2. So let's put it in the sequence how we generally learn thing, right? So it is like this. So 2 into pi into r, that is radius, the radius which we set at the self. So that will give you the value here. Now I'm not printing here. I'll print it from my calling process. So let's call it from here. To call this value, you need to first have an object of the circle class. Okay. So that is how you define. Now, you can either pass a radius value over here or you can leave it. If you leave it, it will become 1. Okay. So if I say radius is 10, it can be 10 centimeter, 10 inch, doesn't matter. But if the value is 10, now then what happens is that it is going to be printed. So let me see why this error is showing up. Okay. Thank you. So this has to be outside. That's very important in Python. Thank you very much for pointing it out. So the indentation matters. So I put that below the class so it was not identifying what that circle is. So I had to use self. If you have to, by the way, if you have to call a class within a class, you need to use the self keyword to do that. Okay, that's what you need to do. You can't really give a name within a class. So now outside the class, you say you define that variable and you just print the output of the get circumference object by calling it get circumference. And then it doesn't need you to pass any value. That's all because it is returning, right? We can use this return value. I don't have to build another result like a member variable and then set it over here. I can just simply get it into my out application. I can say that just to so is okay. Now let's see. Now that not this file, definitely not this file. So we need to call this circle.py. Uh, yeah. So in that case, you can't do this. Yeah, you can. That's correct. That is correct. So you can convert it to string by saying str, or you can use this comma. Then it will be handled by Python automatically. Both ways fine. So if you say so, now you can see that the result is coming as big as that. Okay. So this is mainly because we are doing this calculation and let the pi having all the value. But if you say 1, 4, then hopefully it'll be smaller. Oh, you still have that thing, right? So that's okay. So you can see that the moment you change the pi value to something which is different, result changes a bit, right? So you can see that from the second decimal value, the result is changing. But more or less, it is around 63 unit. That is the circumference, right? So you can do this geometrical calculation and build um, a class out of Python and check your result if you're doing that as part of mathematics. So that also is sometimes helpful if you want to test what you're trying to do is correct. Huh? So you can build something and then just have an input. And you know that yesterday we talked about getting the input, right? Radius, input, enter the radius in cm, centimeter. And if you do that, and I use the radius over here, which means the value of the radius, but I can say float. That means I'm going to convert it to float, or I can convert it to int. So whichever way I want to convert it, I can convert it. And then what happens next time if I run this, it will ask me to enter the value of the radius. So let's say this time I enter 20, so I get the output as 20, right? So you can make this kind of interactive programming to test your geometrical calculation. Okay, so make sense here? Any question at this point in time? No question, no doubt. Mm-hmm. That's good. Yes, please.